Every person has the potential to lead. Everyone is leading already, and they don't realize they are. And everybody has the potential to do it and do it well. Some are on different scales, but I think it's important to have that thought process in mind when you hire people, when you put people in new roles, when you're having conversations with current leaders, because what's going to happen is it's going to change how they receive information from you.
Exude Human Capital hosts Hold On, Let Me Close My Door, bringing real HR stories from real professionals with real solutions to you. Join us as we navigate the ever changing workplace with Allison DeFlorio, co founder and managing partner, Exude Human Capital, and special guests. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Hold On, Let Me Close My Door. I'm Allison DeFlorio, and I'm joined once again by my co host, the fabulous facilitator, trainer, coach, Doug May. Doug, welcome back.
Oh, thanks, Allison. It's so great to be here. And I think I'm just going to have you follow me around and introduce me everywhere. So I sound much greater than I actually am, but I'm so happy to be here today.
Well, I'm glad to have you today because I know you've done a lot of webinars and conversations around our topic today, which we're going to call Lead or Lose, Shaping Tomorrow's Leaders, and really focusing on what's happening with leadership development or not happening with leadership development for that very critical role of the middle manager in organizations.
Well, and you're also finding, I mean, if you hear this a lot, even when you're doing recruiting or trying to find the right people, this is a question that you get all the time. What are you going to do to develop me?
Mhm.
Because people have options. And so it's really important that we look at how can we make it more attractive for them to come to our organization, and what can we give them to make to take the next step in their career. So I think it's a great topic.
Exactly. And it's a win-win because not only are you helping them be successful, you're helping your business be successful. So we have a fantastic guest with us today who spends his time in this space and has developed some really interesting ideas around how to develop leaders. So I want to welcome Brian Zemba, founder and CEO at CHT Leadership Consulting, which is based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thanks so much, Allison. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on the podcast, and I'm excited to really dive into some of the essential, exciting things that can help leaders in that middle management space and at any level, essentially. But I think there's some great excitement behind actually finding those principles and yeah, honing them in. So I'm so thankful to be here.
Great. Brian, can you tell us a little bit about your work, your company and your work in this space?
Yeah. So the company is, of course, as your aforementioned, CHT Leadership Consulting, um, founded in 2020. Kind of got off the ground then. Came from 20 years of myself being in that middle management to C-suite level space, really trying to find a leadership development myself because there is a great lack of that. And through some of those frustrations and wins and losses, really knew that I needed to come alongside those that were up and coming leaders, might have been stuck in their roles or desired to do even more as it relates to leadership in general. And that was the reason why I founded the company. And that's kind of what I've been doing for the past 5 years is, yeah, walking alongside folks, unveiling some of the struggles that they might have, areas that they didn't even know are weaknesses, and also strengths, and being able to support the weaknesses and also the strengths to help them lead the people that they've been assigned to. So
And it's interesting too, because there's just been so much change in the last 5 years. Even people who at one point may have had the confidence to lead effectively have been a little turned upside down. At least that's what we're seeing and hearing. I want to share a couple of interesting stats. for our listeners about the plight of these middle manager leaders, if you will. And Harvard Business Review came out in 2023 with a study that said that 55% of middle managers report feeling unprepared to handle high pressure situations or strategic decision making, and that impacts their confidence in taking leadership roles. Follow that up with Deloitte in 2024 saying that 63% of middle managers feel that their career growth has plateaued due to a lack of leadership development, and that they report is affecting their confidence. And lastly, this year in 2025, PwC shared that only 29% of middle managers feel they have the necessary leadership skills to effectively navigate organizational change. And they're indicating a gap of confidence in leaders. So, with that, Brian, can you tell us, how would you describe the current state of leadership development in the workplace?
You did a superb job with those three statistics, um, because that is what I'm seeing right now, right? I'm seeing a great frustration, and unfortunately, a lack of preparation from the C-suite level, but also the mid-management level or the level that's above mid-management, right? Because there's usually a level in between there, and those managers are not prepared to lead either. So what happens is we're having this trickle down of lack of leadership skills or understanding people, and that's really my focus is really to understand people better. Because when we understand the people and the gift sets and the passions and purpose that they have, you want to know what? It's like a gold mine because you get to tap into and utilize the skill sets they have, and then know how you can complement the current skill sets they have. So that's probably the biggest thing that I'm seeing in the leadership development space, or unfortunately, the lack thereof. Right. So trying to step into that space. So
Mhm.
So why do you think that's happening, Brian? Why do you think we have this lack? I mean, what do you think the causes are?
there is something that I call the 1950s mindset,
Mm,
and what this is we take people that are really good at making these phones or pens or notebooks, and they kind of cap out at a payroll, right? They're at the top end of the payroll. So we have two options. We let them go somewhere else where they can use their skill sets and maybe get paid more, or we make them the leader of everyone so that they can go ahead and have a higher ceiling. It's usually the latter that happens, and that's happened a lot over the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, and even more now. Um, So we are having people that are not prepared to be leaders. They've had no leadership development, but they're really good at doing things. So now we have a lack of people to do the things, which they're good at. And we have terribly trained leaders, which is pretty rash and hard to say, but that is a fact. And they're just ill prepared. So we're throwing them up there. And now our turnover is extremely high. Our retention is extremely high, or really low, excuse me. Um, and they're unhappy because they're
And
frustrated.
that's what we see, that unhappiness because of all the reasons you just stated, that can rise to a level of frustration, which
Yes.
can rise to the level of saying or doing things that a manager probably shouldn't do, that lead to other employee relations issues or complaints. When you think about it from your perspective, what have you defined as the core competencies of leadership? What are those things that aren't being developed today that should be?
Yeah. So that's actually where I came up with the name CHT Leadership Consulting. CHT stand for those three pillars that I feel are the most strong skill sets that we need to have at any leadership level, but essentially mainly at the middle management level. The C stands for confidence. The H stands for humility, and the T stands for teachability.
Mm.
So with those, of course, diving into those a little bit more, confidence. If you don't have that, or hasn't been instilled in you by proper training, proper situations, proper role placement, if there's an imbalance there, you're going to lead very weak, right? You don't have confidence in what you're doing, you're going to be very weak. If you're overconfident and have lack of humility, now we're going to be at a spot where we're imbalanced, or we're going to be charging around and pointing fingers and be more authoritative. And that's not going to have the greatest results usually, right? And then the third piece is the teachability piece, because there's this continued learning piece that we talk about in the leadership development world, right? Where we should always be looking to grow, and we're always should facilitate leadership development and growth consistently, so that we are staying front line, that's staying front of mind, but it's also pushing those leaders forward to be as successful as possible on a daily basis.
So, and thank you for that. I think, and Doug, feel free to chime in here. I want to talk about confidence
Mhm.
and how you go about either through coaching or training. I mean, training is a piece of this, right? Making sure
Mhm.
you understand how to do something, you have the skills, the tools. But the confidence piece is huge. And I think that's where we see, and the stats support that there's a huge gap. So how do you build what do you see, and how do you build confidence in those emerging leaders or those middle managers?
So for me, understanding the person and what makes them tick, it has to be the number one thing, because I coach sports teams for my children, and I do other things like that, which I really enjoy. Um, president of my BNI, which Doug and I have discussed those and things in the past. But essentially, when you get to know the person at the micro level and understand what makes them tick, now we can start building blocks on top of that to actually encourage them to be confident, right? And then putting them in situations where they have small wins. And when you have small wins, those stack up to bigger wins. And before you know it, they come in with just a different aura about them, understanding that they can do it, and that the leadership sees that they can do it, and the employees respect them. And there's a lot that goes into that confidence piece, but it's more of empowering them to take the steps forward based on who they are and the role that they're in.
Yeah, so let me ask you this about the middle manager, because that seems to be where a lot of this issue happens. Like, so I've had clients and who have their middle managers don't feel like they have the authority, or I guess
Mhm.
authority is probably the wrong word. Well, maybe that is the right word, to make these decisions and move forward, so they don't grab the leadership piece. So, and I think that's a piece of confidence. So what would you do in that case with somebody who's like they have the title,
Right.
and all of a sudden they're not doing what they're supposed to do? And we see that a lot with companies where they come back and say, well, Brian told me we had to do it this way. So how do you get them to have that confidence and ownership? And I know that's probably a really hard question. so, so
Well, it is a hard question, but it's unique, right? And it happens in a lot of situations, but every company is super unique, because in the question that you referenced, the person that's leading, the person that's the middle manager, has just as much responsibility in the confidence of that middle manager as the middle manager of themselves, right? And you kind of alluded to that briefly, but what I would do is I would pursue that the leader of the middle manager, right? I would say, hey, we need to have clear expectations, communicated clearly, consistently, um, and then encouraged, right? So if you do those three things, like we all want high standards, and we all want to be held accountable to those standards. So if we don't know what the standards are, there can be no accountability. And then in turn, the only avenue left is for the leader of the middle manager to actually take the leadership role, rather than allowing the middle manager to take that leadership role, right? So getting that person in the room and just, hey, let's be aligned. Let's make sure that we're focused in the same area. We have the standards, we can hold them accountable, and now you can empower them to do the job, and you can step back, right? And there's freedom for that leader and for the middle manager. And I think they both have a lot more joy and confidence in each other.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I know we do see the gap in that manager of middle managers
Mhm.
who also has a lot on his or her plate and also may have risen without through the ranks without necessarily having been developed in certain core
Mhm.
competencies. And this is something we hear, and I'm curious to know how you address this when you come across this in business. Well, you can say to that manager of managers, you need to reset expectations, and you really should be sitting down and helping build, give these people experiences and coach them. And they'll say, well, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to coach them. They were hired to do the job. They're not doing the job.
Yeah.
Wow. That what you hit the nail on the head with a few points, right? So oftentimes those managers of middle managers were the middle managers that stuck it out long enough to get promoted. Right. They were
Yeah. Yeah.
frustrated, but
Yeah.
they stuck around just long enough, and they said, "Well, you're still here. We need a new person in this role," and they move them up. Right. So I think a pivotal piece in the coaching leadership development, in the coaching of leadership development, is asking the right questions. It's not about me saying this is what you need to do. It's about me asking, where are you with this? Where are you with these competencies? Have you ever been trained on this? And you can do that in a very eye to eye conversation, right? And having that conversation, and that's revealing, because what's going to happen is if we do our job well, which the three of us are in this space, they're going to answer the question themselves. They will reveal that, right? They're going to say, "Oh my gosh, I have not been investing in my people, and I need to be invested in so that I can invest in my people." And what's going to happen is there's going to be this trickle down, where, as we just stated, the same outcome, hopefully, great joy, high standards, great communication. As Doug likes to say, communication, communication, communication. And we kind of kill two birds with one stone, right? We get to train up the manager of the middle managers. And in turn, the middle manager feels confidence, freedom, empowerment, and altogether a whole different culture in that workplace, right? Um, and that's by strategic questions.
I love that concept, that trickle down, because it truly is that. I think there there has been a shift where the manager employee or manager to manager relationship was, oh, you're the senior manager, you must know everything, so I'm going to come to you and you're going to give me the answer. But
Mhm.
really what they should be doing, or what they should be armed with, is asking the questions, so that when they work through the questions for the middle manager to find the answer, confidence is built.
Yes.
So, what do you say to the business leaders who say, "Oh, we don't need coaching. We don't need coaching here. Nobody has time for that, and it's too expensive."
That's great. That's a great comment, because I think that is a popular comment. It has definitely been less and less popular, that statement. It's becoming more and more. People are becoming more and more open to coaching and leadership development, and I think it's necessary. And the easy statement is, how can you afford not to do it, right? Because the benefit that comes with it is the things we already discussed: lowers turnover, higher retention, changes work culture, and you become a place that people want to flock to rather than sprint away from. Um, and there are so many key figures, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but where you can increase your bottom line profits with such simple tasks, where we invest in our people, right?
Mhm.
Where we take time to listen well, coach them well, ask the right questions. And even if it's for a small period of time, it has to be consistent. But over that 3 to 6 month period of time, you're going to see a change. You will see a change because people just in general, just with the initial investment of coaching, and this is what I would tell, or I do tell leadership, executive leadership teams, C-suite level, with the acknowledgement that it's necessary and the desire to invest, even if it's for a small period of time, your employees, middle management, and even below are going to be so thankful that they actually get support that the benefits going to be seen really quickly. At least that's what I've seen when I've engaged in small group coaching or individual coaching. The benefits immediately come into play, and yeah, how can you afford not to?
Yeah. And I love that, I am a huge believer, we at Exude are huge believers of that combination of coaching at different levels of an organization. So executive leaders are living in a scary place in today's times. There's a lot of
Yes,
uncertainty. There's always uncertainty, but there's more uncertainty in today's workplace than ever before. Just so many external factors that are impacting the workforce. So the executive leader needs that guidance. Certainly that middle, not they're the senior leader above the middle manager, the manager who's managing managers
yes,
needs that guidance. We have seen that work well both in an individual coaching session and a group coaching session, which not only helps them build confidence, but helps them build relationships across the organization with others who are maybe in different departments or functional areas who are experiencing similar issues. So it has that unintended impact as well.
it's interesting that you said that because as you were saying those pieces of information, I think the greatest impact there is the common struggle that happens at that level across all organizations, right? It's kind of like when you get into eh, and this is maybe a terrible reference, but like an AA meeting or something like that, where you're in a group coaching session, essentially, right? Where you're saying, hey, I struggle with this. And you can look over there and they're struggling with the same thing. They may
Mhm,
look different, they might have a different role over different people, smaller team, same struggle,
mhm.
right? And we just need someone to facilitate in those situations, right? And that was us. That's where we go in and we ask the right questions to reveal where they're actually at. So now we can actually build upon that, right? Um, yeah, and that's huge.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think it's important as well when you talk about that is the creating of expectations. So this is what or what I need, I guess is probably a better way of looking at it. So this is what I need to be successful. So if I'm working for your organization, this is how I want to be communicated with. This is how I would like to be able to take information back to my team. So it's really kind of defining those expectations about how our relationships are going to work.
Mm,
And I think we don't take the time to do that. It's sort of been that old school, well, okay, I'm just going to tell you to do it and now go do it, right? So
yes.
you really think about how do we define those expectations between each other?
Mhm. I want to ask you about, you mentioned your CHTs with confidence, humility, and teachability. Can we talk about humility a bit? How do you help someone to develop humility? Because that can be, depending on people's life and work experiences, that can be a tough one.
This comes from my parenting. Um, we all think that I think this is a human trait. There are things in our lives that we think we're really good at, just a natural, but we're really good. I'm really good at, if you, I asked you, you probably could name 2 or 3 things, right? We do this in interviewing, right? We get, what are your 3 strengths? So you got 3 strengths right off the top of your head. What are your 3 weaknesses? Uh, I don't know. Right. And this is the trend for humans. So what we have to do is we have to reveal where, and I use terms that are maybe a little bit different, but like where their heart is at, right? Why are you doing this role? Again, it goes back to their skill sets, goes back to relationships. We kind of named these things already, but with humility, when we start uncovering all of these different silos and in their role, no matter what happens outside of work, they have a responsibility in work. And what we're going to see is maybe they struggle in this area or they're great in this area. We're going to be able to see those strengths and weaknesses. When we see those, immediately that's humbling. There's an immediate sense
Mm.
of humility that happens, right? Like it's a natural thing. If Doug or you, Ellison, would say to me, "Hey, I struggle with this," when you say those words, it puts you in a posture of humility,
Mhm.
right? Or sadness or weakness. But humility oftentimes sets us up to be confident, right? When we could say, I have a weakness and it brings humility, that all those we can use that humility to set us up to be
Mhm.
confident.
Well, it makes me think of vulnerability as well. And I think
True.
I think that's what that may be a piece of what managers are afraid to appear vulnerable in the workplace. So
I
and
mean, that's the relationship piece, right, Doug?
that's where you
Right?
connect, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you can go as deep as you'd like to, but when you're able to say, you're right, when you're vulnerable and transparent, and ultimately, I think again, humility is in the same circle with those words.
Mhm.
People desire to follow those type of leaders. And those are the conversations you have with the leaders, right? And these managers, people desire to follow someone that they can relate to,
Mhm.
that they know isn't perfect, that is still growing and learning. And now there's actually hope for the people that you manage, right? Like
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like we actually create a culture of hope, excitement. Wow, I can even do that, even though I'm not perfect. Because you said that earlier with senior leadership, right? When you
Yes.
get up there, it looks like there's an aura or a thought that they have it all together. They got it all figured out, and it's not true.
I think you also just made a nice little segue into that final
yeah.
teachability competency, because if you can demonstrate humility and vulnerability and recognize that there are things, I don't care what level of the organization you're in, that you could learn, you could be better at, and I could
Mhm.
learn from someone that I manage or supervise because they're stronger in that than I am. Then you
Yeah.
develop that competency of like that growth mindset, that of teachability. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I do a good amount of work with manufacturing and production facilities, and they have a term called the Gemba walk, right? Where the leaders will come down and walk the floor. And what this does is it opens up the eyes to the leader, of course, because they're seeing the people doing the work, but it also opens the eyes to the employees that the leaders want to be present. And this is a piece of teachability that kind of could get lost pretty easily. But when we take intentionally put ourselves in positions at the level below us or even a couple levels below us, it makes us have to be teachable, right? Because we're here learning. Like, I don't know what's happening. I do not do the process to make the thing, right? But I would love to see how you make the thing. How do we interact? What does the training look like? What is 5S, right? What is happening on the lines? All of those types of things and those tasks, that is teachability being lived out,
Mm.
right? And I think teachability is probably one of the most intentional. You have to be the most intentional with teachability because confidence comes through in how you speak to people and how you lead. Humility comes through in how you have relationships, right? And how you lead the people through those relationships. Teachability doesn't come through unless you intentionally put yourself in a position to have to be taught, right? Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't happen.
Hmm.
Or it's through embarrassment where you didn't know something and someone was like, "Hey, Allison, you didn't know that. Why didn't you know that?" And you're like,
Yeah.
and then you get defensive and now you're not humble and now and you're embarrassed, right?
Yes.
So teaching leaders to be intentional in the teachability area is going to it will transform how they lead and how people see them.
Love that.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. So if you're talking to our listeners right now and they're business leaders and HR professionals and they're saying, okay, we want to think about what we do now. How do we begin to do some sort of leadership development in our organization? What's the best piece of advice that you have for helping leaders develop others?
I think the most important piece is take the first step. I think one of the big questions that I think is important for the listeners to hear, every person, and this is simple, this is very simple, but I think it's profound. Every person has the potential to lead. Everyone is leading already, and they don't realize they are. And everybody has the potential to do it and do it well. Some are on different scales, but I think it's important to have that thought process in mind when you hire people, when you put people in new roles, when you're having conversations with current leaders, because what's going to happen is it's going to change how they receive information from you. And ultimately, it's going to, in a simple sense, empower your leadership team right off the bat. So
I love that. I think that's a great note to wrap our conversation on. And I just truly want to thank you, Brian Zemba, founder and CEO at CHT Leadership Consulting, for sharing your insights, and you've given me some things to think about. Doug, how about you?
Yeah, I have a lot to think about now. So I really like the humility piece because a lot of organizations don't talk about that. So I like that a lot.
Brian, before we go, you had shared a quote with me when we spoke. I don't know if you have it handy, but I would love for you to just kind of close us up by sharing that quote, if you would.
Yes, integrity is who we are, when people are not only when people are looking, but when we are walking through life in any situation. It is who we are. And I think that is something that we have to be focused on daily.
Great. Brian, Doug, thank you both so much for having this conversation this afternoon. And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Hold On, Let Me Close My Door. Until next time.